Hi everyone, we are back reading Medicine Walk by Ardith Mayer. The last time we read chapter 13, and in chapter 13, Burr Henderson finally finds a house. And in that house there is an Indian who actually takes care of him and feeds him and gives him water. And they have quite a long talk about Nachito, and this Indian that he finds has actually heard of Nachito through the old ways. And they also talk about how it was the old ways and maybe the cougar or some totem symbols such as the cougar, the snakes, whatever, and Burr Henderson listening to the land that helped him to get through his journey. And now we will be reading chapter 14. We're getting close to the end. This one's entitled Grandpa. Here we go. It wasn't long before Miguel decided I was fit to travel and loaded me in his antique pickup, along with his camping gear and lots of books. He stopped at the first tiny settlement, which wasn't much more than a combination gas station and grocery store. "I'll call from here," he said. "No use letting your grandfather suffer longer than necessary. Then I'll take you into town. It will take us so long to nurse Bertha here along these roads that he'll probably be waiting for us, if he can get a charter promptly. Small planes aren't always easy to come by on short notice." I didn't get out of the pickup. I was so tired that it seemed as if my bones had melted. Nothing could excite me much. I nodded and tucked my feet up on the ragged seat of the pickup. My knee hit something hard, and I ran my hand under the red blanket covering it. It was another book. The title jumped out at me. It was called The Totemic Beast, Rites of Adolescence. Was printed in gold above the name of the author, Miguel Corona Sanchez. I could hardly wait till he came out of the store and cranked up Bertha. "Did you write this?" I asked, holding the book. He grinned, his cheeks creasing into long lines. "Yes, that is one of mine." "But you're Apache. Why the Spanish name?" "My family chose it when the whites demanded family names of us. Most Apaches spoke Spanish before learning English, a way back. It was easiest. Our real names, the Apache ones, we keep to ourselves." He steered around a boulder that had tumbled from the cliff onto the roadway. "I teach in a university. I'm on sabbatical leave right now, for a year. It would have been years, maybe, before I came back to camp into my old hut. My leave is up this weekend." Kind of makes you think, doesn't it? It did. But something had me thinking hard. Was this my rite of adolescence? I asked him. Some Indian tribes sent their boys out to fast and pray and wait for a sign that would give them a name for their adult lives. Was that what I did? I had no idea of doing that when I had started. I didn't want to, but was that what really happened? Miguel shrugged. The old pickup rocked from side to side along the rutted track. "Quien sabe? Nobody nowadays takes such things seriously." But it worked, whatever it was. You have your name. You are now a man, no matter that you were a boy just a few days ago. You have earned a name by all my people's rules. "What is it?" I asked him. Something terrifically excited was fluttering in my stomach. "Tell me, please." He looked over at me, his brows raised. I can't do that," he said. "Only the one who lived it all, saw the visions, felt the sun, dreamed the dreams, can do that. You tell me." I swallowed hard. Then I thought for a long time as the truck jounced along. There were so many things to think about. I'd learned from people like Dad and Nachito and Charlie. I'd learned from that first snake, from the wind and the rock and the few plants. But most of all, I'd learned from the cougar. It had prodded me at all the right times. It would take a while to figure out what my name might be, but I knew without a doubt what my totem was. We pulled into a small, dusty town about noon, and Miguel stopped at a Dairy Queen. He brought back 2 huge chocolate milkshakes. I hadn't thought I was hungry until the first cold, thick, chocolatey glob slid down my throat. I'd never tasted anything so good in all of my life. We drove on toward the airport where a limp windsock hung from a mast on a single hanger. We parked in the shade of the Quonset-type terminal and asked at the desk inside if Grandpa had arrived yet. Before the girl could answer, there came a hail from the back of the building, and Grandpa limped forward from the worn couch where he'd been sitting with his head below the level of the front counter. "Burr! My boy, come here! Let me make sure I'm not fooling myself again." He held out his arms and I dived into them. For the first time in almost a week, I was where I belonged, with my own family. I felt his heart thumping beneath his cotton shirt, and I knew my own was keeping time with his. When he finally let me go, I stepped back and looked up into his face. His white mustache was bristling the way it does when he doesn't want to show his feelings. He was looking over my head toward Miguel. "Dwight?" he asked in a small, quiet voice. You didn't mention him when you called." Miguel shook his head, his face sad. Grandpa straightened his back. His eyes shone bright with tears for a second, and then they were dry again. I could use that trick. My own face was all wet. When Grandpa reached out to me again, I let it go. I really cried, as I had needed to do for a very long time. When I was done, I wiped off the wet on Grandpa's shirt before coming up for air. I felt a lot better, though I knew that cold lump would be inside me for a long, long time. I finally remembered my manners and said, "Grandpa, this is Miguel Sanchez. He teaches in a university and writes books and rescues me." Grandpa reached out his hand and took Miguel's. Neither of them spoke for a moment. Then Miguel smiled. "You are together now, with family, which is a good feeling, as I know all too well. My address is in this book." He held out Rites of Adolescence, "which I think you have earned. Write to me. Tell me anything you remember as time goes along. I will be more than interested. But now I must go. I have to go back to work on Monday." I looked at Grandpa, who fumbled in his wallet and took out one of his cards. "You can reach us here anytime. The boy may want to live with us, or he may want to go back to the ranch. That'll be up to him. He's always been pretty level-headed. I can see that he's grown up since I saw him last, too. But you can reach him through me. Thank you, sir. You little know what comfort you have brought to an old man and his wife." Miguel shook hands, turned, and went to Bertha. The pickup started in a cloud of smoke and left in a storm of fumes mingled with dust. I stared after him, feeling somehow lost. Beyond the road, the mountains loomed, distant and dim. Up there, I'd left the Burr Henderson I had been my whole life. He hadn't been a bad fellow. I liked him pretty well, all things considered. I felt a tug inside me. I could see a deep canyon, a tawny flicker of motion. I shook myself. I've got to write to him soon. I know my name. It has to be learned from the cougar, I said to Grandpa, who looked puzzled. What's that all about? He asked me. Suddenly, I was ravenously hungry. Does this dump have a lunch counter? I asked. He nodded, and I tugged him toward it. I'll tell you about it, Grandpa, while we eat. Right now, it's just struck me that I am starving. Do you mind if I talk with my mouth full? Mom would have killed me, but I talked around and through the hamburger and fries and the whole time we ate. Grandpa was astonished, shocked, concerned. All the right responses. But I found myself not quite satisfied. Miguel had understood everything, down to his toenails. Nachito and Charlie would too, when I had a chance to talk to them. I knew with a kind of sadness that only another one of the people would really comprehend what it was that I was saying. But I smiled at Grandpa and kept on talking. The last thing that we're going to read is called the postscript. This is kind of what happens afterwards. If anybody wonders, I went back to the ranch to live with Nachito and Charlie right at hand. My mom's cousin, Sidney Farrell, had just been laid off his job in Detroit. He's an automotive engineer and was looking for something to do. Grandpa fixed it up for him to bring his family out and live with me and look after things until the will gets settled and things sort of simmer down a little bit. I like Sidney, and even his daughters are not too bad, as little kids go. I can see that they're young enough to teach, if I get started on them. His wife doesn't much like living in the West, but she's all right, and she'll adjust, I think. Dad left trusts set up with guardians and that sort of thing. I'll probably end up living with Nachito and his son and family. That's what I'd like. Sidney and his bunch can have the big house for as long as they like. Charlie and I are being taught together now. Nachito admits that I may not have to live more than a century to make one of the people. I'm gaining on it. The end. I hope you enjoyed Medicine Walk by Ardith Mayer. This is one of my favorites. This is a good introduction to something we'll be starting at the end of the week after you pick up our new curriculum. We're going to be starting a unit on Native Americans. Have a great week.